Hello, and welcome to Sundays at Coastal. This week we have a special guest speaker, Pastor Mia Shin, preaching a sermon titled Character in Chaos from the book of Ruth. Naomi came to see God as her security. She also became the grandmother of Obed and the ancestor of Jesse, David, and Jesus, our Savior. Sometimes we don't see what God is doing. Through Naomi's story, God reveals himself as the orchestrator of salvation, no matter the pain we endure. When we see God for who he is, we can also see ourselves clearly. When we believe lies about ourselves, God is still with us in the chaos. He's always working to open our eyes to the truth, so we experience the fullness of life right there in the chaos. Will you let him?
Good morning. We'll be talking today about character in chaos. So, whose character? God's character? God's character in us? In the midst of chaos. Matt mentioned a little bit about the chaos of this morning. Yes. So don't answer out loud, but why did you come here this morning? Because sometimes we just do things. Sometimes I have to fight myself to come to church. I don't know, does anybody relate? Hello? Because of the chaos in my life, chaos in the world, chaos in my mind. But we made it, we're here, so I ask that you be here and be present, because it's really, there is this struggle that happens when we want to be where we know where we should be, and yet there's resistance in us. So let's be here. So God's character and God's character in us. In the book of Ruth. It's a short book in the Old Testament, just 4 chapters. This story is peculiar because the book of Ruth is actually embedded in the book of Judges. And what I mean by this is that somewhere in the midst of the story of the book of Judges, 200-year span, there's this happening right here, the book of Ruth. And then within that, there is this tiny life, a peculiar reality happening in the life of Naomi. The book is called the book of Ruth, and we usually think of Ruth and then Boaz who marries Ruth, but we're going to talk about Naomi today. Ooh, everyone is intrigued. I love that. Here's the backdrop or the context of the book of Judges, the time when Naomi lived. Okay, so Joshua brought the people out of the wilderness. They were there for 400 years wandering, and they were told to maintain their faith and listen and this and that. And did they do it? It's the story of our lives. Okay, and here's the cycle. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Then they were punished to their oppressors. Then they cried out to God for help. And then God would send a judge, not the kind of judge that we think of in our minds. It's like a militaristic leader, would send a leader to deliver them. But then as soon as they died, they would repeat the cycle again. So over and over and over, 200 years, through 200 years and through 12 leaders. What happened? Somebody recorded what I said, and it just played back my mind. What's going on? What was that? Technology. Okay. The people of God did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They did what was right in their own eyes. These 2 phrases happen over and over and over and over and over and over again in the book of Judges. Let's read this together. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Think about how these 2 statements are related. What they were doing that was right in their own eyes was evil in the eyes of the Lord. That's how these 2 statements are related. And it happens over and over. It's chaos. This is our context, even today. So now, let's talk about, remember that little green dot in the beginning? Naomi, in this context. Now, how many people remember reading the book of Ruth? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people remember what the story was about, kind of? A little, maybe. Who wants to come up here? Just kidding. Okay. Don't worry. Naomi is often forgotten in the book of Ruth. So I'm going to give you a little summary. And this is kind of the Sunday school version. There was this family. They went to Moab to avoid famine, but ironically, the husband dies and the 2 grown sons die. Naomi tells her 2 daughters-in-law, go back to your families because if you follow me back to Bethlehem, then there's no hope for you to get remarried. There's 2 daughters-in-law. Orpah, she goes back. She's like, oh yeah, I'm out of here. She goes, and then Ruth is the one who stays, and what a sacrificial woman. That usually is the focal point for Ruth. Someone related to Naomi's husband, his name is Boaz, ends up being able to take over the land of Naomi's husband and marries Ruth. It's like a package deal, land and marriage. And then Boaz and Ruth have a kid named Obed, and they live happily ever after. That's it, the end. Thank you for coming. That's usually what we remember. And if you haven't guessed already, I'm about to change up this generalized account, if you'll allow me. The following verses are from NASB, which I've condensed for ease of reading. Now, most of the time, because of the patriarchal system in which the Bible was written, we see characters who are mainly men. But today, I just want to tell you, I have had no issue as a Christian, like reading through the Bible and going, oh my gosh, Peter, he did so many dumb things. Oh, that's like me. Oh. And then putting myself in the shoes of, oh my gosh, the sons who were like, should we rain down fire on this town for not listening? I was like, oh no. And putting myself in the shoes of these men. But today I want to encourage all the people here, men included, to place yourself in the shoes of this old woman, Naomi. Let's read together. Now it came about in the days when the judges governed that there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to reside in the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. So they entered the land of Moab and remained there. Then Naomi's husband died, and she was left with her 2 sons. Stop. Okay, Naomi, young mother of 2 boys, left with her husband to live in Moab, and Moab was enemy territory. Enemies to the people of God. I just want you to know that. Then her husband died. And it kind of says it kind of matter-of-factly, Naomi's husband died, and then she was left with her 2. But just kind of think of that. Naomi was grieving. She was now a single mother in an unfamiliar land, but at least she had her 2 sons. Next slide. Let's read together. And they took for themselves Moabite women as wives, and they lived there about 10 years. Then both her sons also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So, Naomi continued grieving. She was jobless because she lived in a culture where women were not allowed to have jobs or an inheritance of the land. This was the system she was born into. She was a widow in a foreign land, childless, poor, unvalued, and grieving. Next slide. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the land of Moab to Judah, because she had heard that the Lord had visited his people by giving them food. So they departed, but Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go, return, each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. So she's left with her 2 daughters-in-law, both of whom were grieving because they just lost their husbands. Let's think about this. And the loss of security because they're all women. Who would marry them? And how could they survive without a job? Next slide. And they raised their voices and wept again. Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. But Ruth said, do not plead with me to leave you or turn back from following you. When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her about it. So they both went on until they came to Bethlehem. So Ruth stays. Ruth stays. As Naomi, place yourself in Naomi's shoes. You're like, go back to your home country, because I'm about to go here. And if you go here, you're going to be the foreigner in this foreign land. And then you can get married and, but then Ruth decides to stay with Naomi. I don't know about you, but if I was Naomi, I would feel like a burden to her, because between the two of them, who needs more? Naomi. Next slide. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred, let's read together, because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? But she said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? Haven't we felt this way toward God? Can you imagine returning to your hometown in absolute devastation, where the people don't even recognize you? She told them, stop calling her Naomi. Call me Mara, she said. You see, Naomi means pleasant. But she was so changed by death and devastation that she completely changed her own name, her own identity, her own mantra. And she says, call me Mara, which means bitter. Can you feel the weight of her story in the midst of the chaos of the time of Judges, where everyone's doing whatever they want, and that's evil in the eyes of the Lord, so there's that chaos. And then there's the chaos of Naomi's life. And what about the weight of your own story? Or my own story? Well, imagine if I walked in here, kind of like Naomi walking back into Bethlehem, walked in here and I say, hi, I'm cynical. Although I'm a Christian, and I've been through I'm a Christian, but I've been through so much childhood and church trauma, abuse, and injustice, that I've changed my name. And it used to be called, don't call me beautiful from the root, which, by the way, is the meaning of my Korean name. But now call me cynical from the core, or cynical for short. If you can't spell it, it's C-Y-N, just kidding. You see, I was a disappointment from the start. Just as the ancient Near East culture valued boys and women were not really worth much, in our Korean culture, there are many things I love about my culture. I love being a Korean American person. But that part of my culture I do not like, and they value boys. So after my sister was born, my parents were really, 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 really hoping that I would be a boy, because my father was the firstborn son. Right? So you gotta have a son, pass down the name. I was not. And I was even told by people that I should have been a boy because I was good at so many things. Like, think about what that implies. When I was finishing my food, all the boys in the neighborhood would come outside and play, and we'd be like, da-da-da-da-da, and I would beat everybody. Okay. There was this constant sense of regret and resentment by my father, and it was beyond favoritism. I mean, it was borderline hatred, and you know how kids sense things, and I sensed that. Then there was alcoholism and abuse, and it was really bad. I hated going home. I wanted to stay in school or orchestra or whatever it was that I was doing, anything but go home, because once I open the door, Lord knows what I'm going to find in the house. So there were also distinct periods of malnourishment, especially when we were younger, because of the alcoholism. But when the abuse came too much, I actually told people. I told my counselor. I called the police. I even begged my mom to leave, mainly to protect her. I was thinking about her, not me. But there was no change in this chaos. Like for Naomi, there was no change in the fact that her husband had died and her 2 sons had died, and now she was going back in devastation, living in poverty, can't have a job, all of that. I now realize that my mom did the best she could. In fact, she's the closest person in character to Jesus. Everybody, I love that. And that even my father was coming from generational alcoholism and abuse, So, add to all this chaos of my childhood that although I met God and the wonderful love of God in this conservative church context, even in that context, I was told that I couldn't fulfill the call of God on my life because I'm a woman. And then in my next context, I said, oh, wow, okay, I'm in this context where they do affirm women, and yet there was bullying and racism because I was a Korean woman. All the things of Naomi's chaos. Don't call me beautiful from the root. Call me cynical. We have an expectation that the life of believers should be without struggle. You know what I mean? Like, okay, my life was crazy. My childhood was crazy. But when I met God, and his love was so great, but then we're like, but isn't everything supposed to work out now? Don't I just pray for something and it shows up at my front door? Amazon, man. We have this kind of expectation, but Jesus himself said, you will have trouble, or you will have chaos. So the biblical reality is that even if you're a believer, you will have chaos, just like everybody else. It's the human condition. In the midst of tragedy, grief, and bitterness, the question you start to ask is, where is God? So let's look at these specific verses. Before, the verses were kind of condensed for you. I will read these, but these are, I want us to get a little bit of detail in here. Chapter 1, verses 16 to 18. Now, here's the full response. But Ruth said, do not plead with me to leave you. Ruth is talking to Naomi. Don't plead with me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me and worse, if anything but death separates me from you. And when she saw that she was determined, when Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her about it. What do you see of God in the midst of that chaos? Has anyone ever, okay, Ruth, the response that Ruth gave, there should be like alarm bells going off in your head, because who says that? Who says that? Where you die, I will die. Wait, that wasn't the first thing. Where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Where you die, I will die. Your God will be my God. And it could almost be a rap song, da 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 da, back and forth. But think about that response. That response is actually miraculous. And if you look very closely at that, we see that Ruth was a gift to Naomi in the midst of her chaos. God, through this miracle, was a gift giver. That's where God was. And when we look at chapter 4, verses 14 to 15, when the season of chaos passed, the women in the town said to Naomi, "Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you one who restores life and sustains your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to Obed. And what do you see of God in this chaos? She was told that Ruth is better, this gift of God is better than 7 sons. The number 7 is kind of the gesture of showing completeness. 7 sons, because her future care would be secure. We see God as her security in the midst of this chaos, giving a daughter-in-law from Moab, the enemy territory, who is better to you than 7 sons. You are secure. That's a gift from God. God is her security. Chapter 4, verse 17 says, and the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. Isn't that interesting? It wasn't a son has been born to Ruth. Did you notice that? Anybody? Okay. A son has been born to Naomi. Ruth is like, wait a minute. So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. This is not just who begat who begat who begat who begat who. This is, oh, wait a minute. Because Obed is the father of Jesse, the father of David, through whom the line of Jesus comes. So through Ruth, this Moabite woman, all of a sudden is this Obed, he is the orchestrator of salvation. Like God is doing things that we don't even know. They're just like, oh, there's a famine, let's go over here. Oh my gosh, okay, well, everybody died, so now we got to go back to bed. And in the midst of all that chaos and madness, God is orchestrating something wonderful. He's the orchestrator of salvation. So we see this in God. We see he is the gift giver. He's our security. He's the orchestrator of salvation. That is the character of God that we see in this account. But what about Naomi? Where's the character of God in Naomi's life in the midst of all of that that's happening? We saw this earlier, but take a closer look. Chapter 1, verse 16 to 17. But Ruth said, do not plead with me to leave you or turn back from you. For where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Your people shall be my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me and worse, if anything but death separates me from you. Has anyone said that to you? For some reason, that song came to my mind. Every move you make, I'll be watching you. They're not watching, they'll follow you. For where you go, I will go. Where you sleep, I will sleep. Your people shall be my people. It starts getting serious. Your God, my God. And where you die, I will die. That means I will follow you to the death. I will be buried. Goes even beyond that. Where you die, I will die. And I will be buried right there. May the Lord do to me and worse, if anything but death separates me. Who has said that to you? So when I see this, I see Naomi's character, a woman so upright, so godly, that someone from the land of Moab would be willing to follow her and make Naomi's God her God. What does that say about Naomi's character? Because you don't just follow anybody. You know that. You don't just follow anybody. They better earn your respect. They better show you that they love you. All of that was being shown in the life of Naomi. Naomi was a leader, worth following. Then chapter 2, verse 20, where else do we see this? Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, this is after God brought Ruth and Boaz together. May he be blessed of the Lord who has not withdrawn his kindness from the living and from the dead. Naomi recognized that God was the provider of connecting Ruth and Boaz, a distant relative, and expressed gratitude in the midst of her chaos. May he be blessed of the Lord who has not withdrawn his kindness. She was expressing gratitude in the midst of her own grieving, loss, hunger, chaos. God's kindness. Naomi the grateful. So not only was she a leader, but she was grateful. Then we see in chapter 3, verse 1, then her mother-in-law Naomi said to her, my daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may go well for you? Naomi was seeking the well-being of her daughter-in-law with this newfound opportunity to marry Boaz. She was caring for others in the midst of her chaos. If anyone needed help, it's Naomi. It's the old lady, the widow who lost her husband and her children. She's caring for others in the midst of all this. It takes a lot, when you're grieving, it takes a lot to just even take a shower. It takes a lot to just even brush your teeth. So the fact that she's saying, I'm going to make sure that you're well taken care of. We see Naomi the shepherd in the midst of chaos. And lastly, we see Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, it's good, my daughter, that you go out to reap with Boaz's young women to glean, so that others do not assault you in another field. Because it was common that women would be assaulted while they're doing work in the field. And another time, Naomi says to Ruth, wait, my daughter, until you know how the matter turns out, for the man will not rest until he has settled the matter of marriage today. So Naomi's sitting there, and she's like, okay, don't get hurt. If you go out with the woman, And then, I know Boaz said this, but then I know he's going to settle things, so just be patient and And you see her having this wisdom, wise counsel, and discernment in the midst of all this. So not only do we see God's character in this life of Naomi as a gift giver, our security, orchestrator of salvation, but we see the character of God in Naomi as a leader, as someone who's grateful, talking about God's kindness, as a shepherd, and as a wise counselor or a discerning person. This is what's happening in the midst of Judges, madness, 200 years, 12 leaders, nobody's listening, everyone's doing what they want, and then death and devastation, destruction, and yet this. So we're going to take some time and reflect on this obscure yet impactful life of Naomi in the book of Ruth in the time of Judges, and answer these questions for yourself. What is the name, first of all, what is the name you renounce today? Regardless of the chaos of this past year, past few years, perhaps even your entire life. Naomi changed her name from pleasant to bitter. What is the false name you have been calling yourself that you're renouncing? I renounce the name cynical. And what is the name you choose to give God today? What is his character that you're willing to acknowledge? Like Naomi, she said, he has not withdrawn his kindness. And recognizing, how has God shown you his character in the midst of your chaos? For me, I would say, for a long time, I had a hard time saying the word Father in the Bible. Or, when it talks about wherever it would say Father. But I realized through writing this message that for actually the first time, so this was yesterday, preachers edit till the very last second. I have a pencil in my purse, and I'm like, oh yeah, this. Yesterday, I was like, okay, so what is the name I would give God? And I think for the first time I was able to say, my true Father. Because, and I'm old, you know what I mean? This revelation is like, it just takes some time for God to do his thing and for him to prove himself to us again and again and prove his character to us.
But I could say that word. I could say my true Father without any kind of baggage to that word. You know what I mean? And lastly, what is the name you choose to be today? You choose to be today, regardless of your state of chaos. The name or character you want to be displayed in your life. Take a good look at these questions. When I realize that the rejection of my father is such a contrast with the magnified love of God, I can call myself beloved. When I realized that my abuse grew in me a heart of empathy for victims, I could call myself empathetic. I'm answering that third question now. When I realized that I have been unheard that I was unheard as a child when I cried out for help, I now call out injustice wherever it is. Yes, even in the church. Yes, even if there's racism, misogyny, spiritual abuse, whatever that is, and I strive to use power rightly. When I realized that God is the one who gave me a strong personality. You know, women can have strong personalities. All the husbands are like, amen. But don't say it out loud. Okay, so God is the one who gave me a strong personality. Even when the world and the church told me that being a woman and strong is bad, I call myself strong. And when I realized that my gifts of evangelism, preaching, and teaching were given to me, an Asian woman, to represent what God can do in the life of the marginalized, I call myself uniquely called. When I realized that I have been given a mother with the heart of Jesus, so really, I don't think I would have survived my childhood without my mom. Mother with the heart of Jesus who enabled me to survive my childhood, and husband who is so secure in his identity and gifts that my fullness does not take away from his fullness, and who is a husband and father that in ways that I have never experienced while growing up. I can call myself a receiver of great gifts. When I realized, I'm still answering number 3, when I realized that God has given me 2 precious sons whom I love dearly, not because of their gender, not because of their abilities, but because they're my children, I can call myself absolutely blessed. Do you see all the ways in which the hand of God, the character of God, was in my life even when I could not see? I'm sure Naomi couldn't see it when her husband died, when her only 2 children died, when she was homeless, when she was starving, when she was bitter and hopeless. So we're going to have some music up now, and we're going to answer these questions. Not we, you. You are going to think about this. I asked you at the beginning, why did you come today? I mean, did you just come to what? Or did you come to meet the character of God? Did you come to just live like the people in the book of Judges, just doing what's right in your own eyes and doing the evil and just, that's it? Or did you come today to hear about how God was so evident in the life of Naomi and that same God is alive today? In your life, in your chaos, He was there, He is here. What is the name you will renounce today? What's the name you choose to give God today? Anybody want to share that? Based on how God has been faithful to you, what is the name you choose to give God today? One brave person? Patient. Papa. Fighter. Healer. Everything. The God who sees. And if you would be willing to share, anyone, what name you choose to be called today,
Maybe it's the opposite of that, the answer to that first question. Child of God. What was that? Blessed. Beloved. Yes. Though you have been calling yourself by a false identity, festering and immersing yourself in the bathwater of this identity, God himself is pursuing you in the midst of your chaos. Whatever chaos that was, whatever chaos that is, he is here. And though life has turned you from Naomi, pleasant, to Mara, bitter, he's ready to restore you into the fullness of who you were meant to be. I call you away from the cycle of life we saw in the followers of God in the book of Judges, where you just became like everyone else in the midst of chaos, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord and doing what's right in your own eyes. Identify yourself by what God has proven to you through his character. I want to call you instead into the truth that it's just true today as it was in the life of Naomi to embrace the reality. The chaos is not the reality. I mean, it's happening, but that's not the reality. The true reality of the character of God and the character of God in you in the midst of all the chaos of your life. Let's pray. If we can continue with the music, please. Thank you for the account of the life of Naomi, one who faced famine, a widow in a foreign land, childless, living in poverty, unvalued as a woman, considered a burden to others, grieving. And yet, you show us how you were present and powerful in the midst of her world of chaos and her personal chaos. And so now we renounce our old name. We commit to living in the reality of your character and commit to reflecting your character in our lives, just as Naomi did. And all God's people said, amen. Amen. I hope this was a word of encouragement to you. Please come up for prayer if you need it, and I invite you to share your reflections over at Table Talk. Have a great Sunday.
Pastor Mia Shin is a speaker, author, and songwriter. Her 20 years of ministry include preaching, teaching, and mentoring in the Asian American and multi-ethnic church contexts, as well as in public high school and college settings. Visit www.miashin.org to follow Mia or learn more about her ministry. You can also join us online each week on Sunday morning at 9 a.m. for our weekly live stream. We also have 2 in-person services at 9 and 10:40 a.m. in our sanctuary. Coastal Community Church is located at 1830 Farrell Road, Grover Beach, California. For more information, visit our website, www.mycoastal.org.